Returning to our basic Colle-Zukertort position, one of my games continued from this point. Bishop e7, bishop b2, black castled, I castled, black played knight b d7. Again, you'll notice that black's move order is extremely flexible, but it really doesn't alter white's attacking plan. However black develops his pieces, white's plan stays the same. Knight b d2. And again, black chose to fianchetto his bishop, b7 to b6, perfectly natural move. Knight e5. But unlike the game Hartston versus Upton, black now chose to eliminate the knight straight away before it could cause any more trouble. So black played the move knight on d7, takes the knight on e5. Well, of course, I recaptured with d4 takes e5, and black retreated his knight back to d7. I played the supporting move f2 to f4, and black developed his bishop. Bishop from c8 to b7. At this point, I became concerned that black might free himself in the near future by playing the move f7 to f6. Now, while this wouldn't be a disaster for white's attacking options, it was a move I wanted to prevent. So I played the move queen from d1 to h5. Again, we haven't really seen this before. There's an obvious threat of taking the pawn on h7, and black chose to prevent this again by the move g7 to g6. Probably the reason black is avoiding the move h7 to h6 is that white could now unleash one of the plans I was talking about earlier of trundling the g-pawn up the board with g2 to g4, followed by g5. Black's kingside is beginning to look very shaky indeed. So black played the more solid move g7 to g6. And now, if I do say so myself, I played quite a clever move. I played the move queen h5 to h3. The idea behind this move is, again, to restrict black's possibilities. I would like to prevent my opponent from freeing himself with either f6 or perhaps blocking things up with f5. Of course, both those moves at the moment are not possible because of the weakness of the pawn on e6. Here my opponent, Mr. Jimenez, in the Andorra Open, completely surprised me with his next move. Probably he was worried about white's attacking possibilities on the kingside, hoping to break through with perhaps g2 to g4, followed by f4 to f5, when the threat of f6 is in the air as well. So he decided that active measures were necessary to combat white's growing initiative on the kingside, and so he struck out on the queen side. I must admit I had not been looking at that side of the board at all, and when he played the move b6 to b5, I wondered what on earth was going on. And after bishop takes b5, I think this is the most accurate move, black revealed his idea, queen a5. So he's attacking both my bishop on b5 and the knight on d2 at the same time. Well, I have very little option now. I must take. Bishop takes d7, and black played queen takes d2. So black's given up a pawn. What has he got for it? Well, I think his idea was that my bishop on d7 would now be able to play no future active role in the game for quite a few moves. It certainly doesn't seem to be doing much of a job on the kingside anymore. The black pawns on e6 and d5 locking it out of the game. But unfazed by this, I continued rook f2, kicking the queen back into touch. My opponent played queen b4. I decided to kick the queen again with a2 to a3. By now I had seen my plan, and I didn't want the queen interfering along the fifth rank. Black played queen b6, and it was here that I unleashed my idea. I played the spectacular looking move f4 to f5. Well, if this move looks spectacular, the next one is even more so. Black, anxious to keep the white bishop out of the game, played g6, takes f5. After e takes f5, the response would have been the same. Rook takes f5. That's a whole rook sacrifice. Well, if black ignores the rook sacrifice, white has various very nice attacking ideas, such as rook from f5 to h5. And it seems likely it's going to be checkmate in the very near future. Black felt he could not, therefore, ignore this rook. He played e takes f5. Bishop takes f5. And now, a familiar theme in the Colle-Zukertort system, white is threatening mate yet again on h7. Well, black really doesn't have many options in this position. If he moves his rook, say, to e8, it does not help, or d8. White will simply play queen takes h7 check, king f8, queen h8, checkmate. So black played really his only move in this position, h7 to h6. And at this point, I brought the bishop on b2 into the game. I told you should make use of every opportunity you can to do this, and at the same time I blocked the queen on b6's defence of the pawn on h6 with the move e5 to e6. Now white is simply threatening queen takes pawn on h6, which is going to be checkmate in the very near future. My opponent played bishop g5. This is the only sensible way to defend the pawn on h6. Now my bishop on b2 got in on the act. I played bishop b2 to f6, threatening simply just to take his bishop and then checkmate as normal. My opponent decided he couldn't sit idly by while this happened. If he makes the move bishop takes f6, I will simply play queen takes h6, threatening queen h7 checkmate. The only way he can avoid this is by playing rook anywhere along his first rank, say b8 for example, but then queen h7 check, king f8, queen takes f7, checkmate. My opponent played f takes e6. I played bishop takes e6 check. Now if the king moves to the h-file, say king h7, then queen f5 is yet again quite a nice checkmate. So again my opponent's response was forced. Rook f7. I played bishop takes bishop on g5. Pawn takes bishop. And now my final piece entered the attack with decisive effect. Rook from a1 to f1. Well, black doesn't again have much choice. His choice is really strictly limited in this game. He played rook from a8 to f8. And now the killer blow. Not a huge swap on f7, but the move rook from f1 to f6. Black resigned. He is defenceless against the threat of rook f6 to g6. Checkmate. Black has another, more aggressive way to set up his pieces. He can play the move 5 knight c6. White castles. Black plays bishop d6. Black can combine this with an idea to either push forward in the centre with e6 to e5, or simple development with castles b6, bishop b7. In this system you have to be slightly more careful as white as to exactly how you develop your pieces in order not to allow black to equalise too easily. After bishop d6, white should play bishop b2. And now black has a choice. Black can either just continue with simple castling, but the move I want to look at first is the move queen c7. This is quite a sneaky move by black. What black's doing with this move is preventing us from carrying out our most natural plan of knight to e5. Therefore, in this position, it's important for white to take a new approach. Otherwise, black also may be able to play the move e6 to e5 himself in the very near future. So I'm going to recommend here the move c2 to c4, combating black in the centre before he gets his own central break in. Now this is quite a committal decision by white, because black, if he wishes, can give white hanging pawns in this position by c5 takes d4, e3 takes d4, d5 takes c4, and now white should play b3 takes c4. Important thing to notice from white's point of view about this position is that your bishop on b2 can still become a very important attacking piece. In fact, you should be constantly looking for opportunities to play d4 to d5 to release this bishop along the long diagonal a1 to h8. There are very few black players who would be willing to undertake the strategical problems that this position presents for them. In fact, a very similar position was reached in Sieg-Beckus, Germany 1989, with the one difference that the queen was on e7. At least with the queen on e7, the knight on f6 is more securely defended. I'll just show you this game now to present some of the ideas that white can undertake in this sort of variation with the hanging pawns. Black in this position played knight b4. White retreated, bishop e2. The knight's not going to stay on b4 for very long, of course. It will be kicked by a3 in the near future. Black played bishop d7, developing. White rook e1, putting the rook on the same file as black's queen and king. Black played rook c8. White kicked the knight back now with a3. Black played knight c6. White played bishop d3. Again, both bishops now are ready to rake towards the black king. Black castled. He can't put it off forever, and besides, white is now getting ready for the move d4 to d5 with a vengeance. White actually played queen d2 here. Probably he has ideas of perhaps bringing the queen over to g5, helping the white attack, especially in conjunction with this bishop on b2. So black now got his queen off the critical file with the move queen d8. White now played a standard move, knight f3 to e5. And black set about attacking white's pawns on the queen side with the move knight c6 to a5. Also, black is hoping to land on the b3 square, which at this moment would win the exchange. So white not unnaturally played the move queen e3 here. The knight on b3 can be tolerated in this position because after knight b3 there would be some tactics arising after bishop takes h7 check, and white could pick up this knight on b3. So black played the move a6. If black cannot win the pawn on c4, normally he's trying to exchange it, which would leave in a position where both the c pawn and the b pawn had been removed. White would leave white with an isolated pawn on d4, which black could hope to exploit. So white finally moved his queen's knight with the move knight d2. Black played b5, very logically. And now white took his opportunity. He played the move knight takes d7. Black, anxious to leave a defender of his kingside, played the move queen takes d7 rather than knight takes, although perhaps it would have been better in that position to actually take with the knight. Because what happens next is a good illustration of the power of the two bishops and the sort of thing you should be watching out for when you play this variation. White now played his thematic advance d4 to d5. Black took a pawn on the queen side, knight takes c4. White recaptured with knight takes c4. Black recaptured, b takes c4. White now launched in with bishop takes f6. Now, black can't afford to take the bishop on d3 with c takes d3 because queen g5 and the end is nigh for black. So, instead, black has to recapture with g takes f6. But now, bishop takes h7 check. Again, another standard sacrifice in this sort of position. Well, black could decline the sacrifice, but his king's in a pretty sorry state anyway. King h8 can be met by queen h3, for example. So black decided he may as well have a piece for his trouble with king takes bishop. But now came queen h3 check, king g7, queen g4 check, king h7, and now white swung a rook over. Rook e3. Black is powerless against white's oncoming attack. He tried the move bishop f4. White could simply take that if he wished, but he found perhaps the more accurate move rook h3 check, and black resigns. A likely continuation, bishop h6, queen h5, and black can do nothing about the threat of queen takes h6 check. King moves, and then either queen h7 or queen h8, checkmate. There's one final thing I want to say about the line with queen c7. That is, after c4, if black ignores the pawn structure for the moment and still carries on with his plan to play e5 anyway, for instance after castles knight bd2, black could try the move e5 in this position, again striking back in the centre. But there's a problem with it in this position. White would play c4 takes d5. Black plays knight takes d5. White plays d takes e5. Black plays knight takes e5. White plays knight takes e5. Black plays bishop takes e5. And just at the point that black thinks he's getting easy equality, comes another tactical shot. Bishop takes h7 check. If the king moves, black simply lost a pawn, but if the king takes the bishop, black loses a pawn anyway, after queen h5 check, picking up the bishop on e5. Black simply can't be so ambitious so early in the opening.